Let us talk about the place of obedience in Christian life. The theme of obedience was presented by St. Paul in a letter to the Romans, reflecting on themes from St. Paul. He wrote, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities." St. Paul and the other disciples of Jesus were taking their first steps in society with an understanding that they were following someone whose kingdom was not of this world. They began to understand that obedience to the state is a result and an aspect of a much more important and comprehensive obedience that the apostles call obedience to the gospel. Every type of Christian obedience must be rooted not in obedience to human beings, but in obedience to God. Using the image of the main thread of a spider's web to illustrate how obedience works. The spider uses that main thread to construct its web, and once done, that central thread is what holds together all of the spider's weavings. Without this central thread, everything collapses. If any other thread breaks, the spider can repair the web. But if that central thread breaks, the spider must junk the web and begin another. The obedience within any human organization, including the church, is the central thread of what keeps each of these organizations running. Lose obedience to God, and there is no church, large C, and there isn't even any church, little c. Now, turn your attention to Jesus, who is defined in Scripture as the obedient one. In his obedience, that St. Paul says it is his obedience that St. Paul says makes us righteous. Jesus becomes obedient unto death, and learned obedience through what he suffered. We too must understand the nature of this act of obedience. It is the exact antithesis of Adam's disobedience. At the origin of all disobedience is disobedience to God, a sin. And at the origin of all obedience is obedience to God. Christ, the obedient one, is the head of those who chose to be obedient in opposition to Adam, who is the head of all of the disobedient. As Christians, St. Paul explained to us that Christians have freely submitted themselves to Christ on their day of baptism. Therefore, with baptism, there came a change of masters, a shift of kingdoms, from sin to righteousness, from disobedience to obedience, from the sin of Adam to the obedience and love of Christ. Obedience is an essential component in the Christian life. Concretely, we can approach each day as Psalm 40 indicates to us. In the author of the letter to the Hebrews puts this, Psalm 40 on the lips of Jesus. As is written of me in the scroll, behold, I come to do your will, O God. Now it's our turn. All of life can be lived day by day under the banner of these words. Behold, I come to do your will, O God. In the morning, at the beginning of the new day, then going to an appointment or a meeting, at the beginning of a new task, we can repeat our vow. Behold, I come to do your will, O God. Keep these words in your mind each day until you are ready to take this pledge of obedience to God. Then joyfully take it. For once you have taken it, you will have never a regret.